Hi everyone, and welcome to Unit 6, the role of the TVI when working with families. Just a couple of things before we get going here in this unit. I'd like to thank you for your patience with me. Again, I know that last week as well, I made some errors and forgot to erase some things within the modules. So I appreciate you letting me know, and hopefully by the end of the course, it will be absolutely perfect. So thank you for bearing with me. And I also wanted to let you know you guys have done a great job on your menu assignments. I sent you an email just letting you know that if you proofread, it will definitely do you well in this course and in all your other courses, because those little errors can result in points getting deducted. And your quizzes were all great as well. Everybody did a really great job, and I really appreciate, and so does Dr. Correa Torres, your panel questions, your questions for the panel that you guys submitted. Everybody did a really good job with those as well, and Dr. Correa Torres wanted me to let you know that she will be sending those to the panel, and then she's going to record it, and then we'll all have access to view it, so that should actually be pretty cool. And something exciting and different to add into our resources and gain some knowledge from. So I'm excited about that. This unit is about the role of the teacher of the visually impaired working with families. And this is a very, very important topic, probably one of the most important, because if you cannot work with families, then it's very hard to work with a child, not in the sense that, you need to be in agreement all the time about everything or anything like that. And you probably won't have access to the child's family much or really be involved if you're working in with school-age children. If you're working with early intervention, we've already kind of gone over those things. But when you're working with school-age children, it's really important that you be on the same page about things, because what you do at school needs to carry over to home. So everybody kind of needs to be on board about what you're doing with the child and how you're approaching their education. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it, really. So this is a pretty important unit. It doesn't have as much complex information as last unit did, but it certainly is really worth looking at all the resources. I've put in a optional reading from your foundations book that you can read if you want to, that just kind of talks a little bit more about roles and responsibilities and about collaboration as well. So you can take a look at that if you want to. And we'll get started here with some information. So I am not a expert by any means in sort of the social aspect of family structure or anything like that. But I thought when I was putting this together, I thought, oh, what would have been helpful to me as a teacher of the visually impaired when getting started working with families. And I will tell you that it's a very large part of your job, especially if you're in early intervention, of course, but it's a large part of your job to just be able to communicate with them. And nobody really teaches you how to do that. And so I think the best thing that we can do is kind of teach you their perspectives on things. So I found this really interesting article online. And let me just, sorry, I don't think you can see the citation here, but it's www.mbaea.org. And this was a little article called Partnering with Families of Children, and I really liked it. And it's not written with blind or visually impaired children in mind specifically, but it's written for children with disabilities. And so it points out the stages of adjustment that parents go through as they kind of go on this journey of their child's disability. They occur in 4 stages as the parents build awareness of the impact of their kid's disability. And I can say, now as a parent, this really makes a lot more sense to me, as do when I think about over the years, parents' responses to things that I said or perhaps judgments that I had about the way that they were doing something with their child. It all kind of makes sense now that I'm a parent and I'm learning more about these things. So just keep that in mind, that we're very quick to make assumptions about things sometimes, and we really can't do that because we just don't know sort of the psychological implications of something like this. And raising a typical child without disability is certainly challenging enough. So one is the ostrich phase. So an ostrich, the implication there is sticking your head in the sand. Not necessarily denial of a disability, but you don't really fully realize its impact. So you know that there's a disability. That part has kind of been called attention to with your child's diagnosis, but you don't really quite understand exactly how it's going to impact their life. Number 2 is special designation. So parents do begin to realize that their child has a special need, and then they seek services. And a lot of time, you know, this can go for children who are very young, or it can go for children who, you know, have a newly acquired injury or disability, because that happens too. The next stage is normalization, where parents do try to make differences between their child and children without disabilities. And those become less apparent, and they may actually request a decrease in services. So kind of understanding that, oh, this is who my child is. They're not typical, but they're not so much different from other kids. They're just kind of doing things differently. So that's really interesting. And that's really realistic, actually, because that's been my experience in my work, that at first parents are like, I want it all, and then they will sort of back off and be like, oh, you know what? I think that we're doing really well here. And of course, your assessments guide that, but they may actually request that you just can kind of do less. You do less with the child, or you have less appointments. I think sometimes what happens within normalization is just realizing too, they better accepted the disability and realizing that what they can handle. How many appointments a week can they go to? How many, how many doctor's appointments can they do? How many people can they see as a part of their child's everyday routines? That kind of stuff, especially for early intervention. But I think it happens with school-age children as well. And the 4th step is self-actualization, where parents begin to feel indifferent towards disability. So they're not like, it's the worst thing in the world that's ever happened to me. They're not like, it's the best thing in the world that's ever happened to me. But they just kind of accept the child for who they are and support the child in learning about their disability. And most important to this includes how to advocate for them to have equal access with other children and get what they need educationally. And a lot of you, or some of you, interviewed parents for your first menu assignment, and those were really very illuminating, because I think those of you who did that really could kind of see that no matter what, parents just want their children to have their best life possible. And that's how we all feel as parents. Everybody wants, what they had for their child, and then a little bit more than that. And everybody wants them to be successful. And so when you put that into that framework, then basically you want the child to be able to say, hey, I'm just like everyone else. These are the things that I need in order to be successful. And I'm going to advocate for those needs. You want to build that into your parenting, I think. Just a little sort of quick snippet. You guys looked at IFSPs in the early childhood unit. So this is just kind of a review of the differences, kind of putting them next to each other so you can see. So a lot of times as teachers of the visually impaired, we're licensed to serve children birth through 21. It's a very large span of age. And so you might be, I've worked in positions where I've been doing both early childhood intervention and serving school-age children. So you could very much have IFSPs and have IEPs going on at the same time. So just some things to remember about birth to 2 is that it's more of a focus on the family and the parents' role in supporting the children. The outcomes are focused on both the child and the family. What are the family's goals for the child? It's supposed to happen in natural environments to the greatest extent possible. Usually multiple agencies are involved. And the IFSP is sort of in charge of integrating all the services from the multiple agencies. There's a service coordinator, or, in Washington State, we call them family resource coordinators, or FRCs, but there's someone of that ilk who basically sort of organizes all of the paperwork, inputs everybody's information, and assists the families with other resources. So say they need help with bills, or they need, to figure out what's the best clinic to go to, or where they can go for help, that kind of thing, resources in the community, or at the state and federal level. The service coordinator can do that. Now, that being said, as the teacher of the visually impaired, you have a little bit more knowledge, perhaps even more so than the service coordinator, unless they've had a lot of experience with blind children, about what some of those resources are. So that's just important to remember, that you are going to be the person who helps that service coordinator get resources for the family in the area of blindness and visual impairment. And every single state has a resource center, or almost all of them do. Some states might share one. where you would go to get services, to get items for children with visual impairments. But then also your School for the Blind or your blind rehab center, those type of places are also places where you could look for services. For example, here in the state of Washington, we have the Washington Talking Book Library, which Mary knows a lot about, and that would be a place where you would provide families with information on how to apply so that their child can get books on tape and utilize and benefit from that technology. So it kind of covers a lot of different services that you can assist families with. And IFSPs usually occur every 6 months, so there's biannual meetings where you look over goals and progress and things that might need to change or things that have changed with a child. And I think that makes sense because little ones are far more dynamic than other students developmental-wise, and that's what, that's usually the things that you're kind of working on. The most change happens there in the first year of life. So the IEP itself, 3 to 21 is child focused and, tends to be academic or functional. The outcomes are also focused on the child. What does the child need to do? What assessments have been done and what was the results of those? And like from those, how do we build upon goals that we can kind of agree on with the family? It's focused on school and classroom environments as opposed to the home environment. But it doesn't mean that the family doesn't have input. The family has a lot of input. And it usually involves a meeting with the family to develop these kind of long and short-term goals. And you'll learn about this more in the assessment course, but the IEP is really supposed to be a working document where the family is able to give input. So the most ideal situation is that you have the IEP ready to go, a week or two ahead of time so that the family can look at it, review it, and let you know what they think could be changed or work with them to make the goals based on, your very open knowledge of the assessments and what have been done and what they need educationally, and then what the family also has priorities for educationally or functionally. But that doesn't always happen because we have a lot of things to do and we often are working in the midnight hour to get our things done and in. So that being said, just remember and relay this to team members that it's still a working document and nothing is decided at all in any sense of the word legally until the family has input on the IEP. And the IEPs are usually held in an annual meeting unless there's been a major change or something like that, or the child has a new diagnosis or there's really new information that might affect what you're doing. And that being said, again, the family input is really, really important here. And you get a lot of information from families. So just remember to kind of include them in your processes. And some strategies to help with that are really trying to understand family life. So kind of trying to understand where those folks are coming from. What is their family life like? Because what might be a priority to you in your family might be very different for another family. And part of that is kind of understanding and having a cultural sensitivity, being understanding of resources that are available to families. What are they struggling with? What are their successes? Try to understand the disability. This is kind of your job, is to understand the disability, the visual disability and how it impacts the children and how it impacts the family. And we've provided you with some resources to understand that better this week. I'm hoping, and really that APH Family Connect website is pretty awesome for looking at that stuff a little bit deeper. Communicate with the families. Just have open communication with them. Send them home notes, text messages, emails, whatever. See what works best for them and then do it. And then don't be upset if they don't get right back to you. Don't think that they don't care about their kids' education if they're not back to you right away. People are busy, as you know, and we can let things fall off sometimes. It doesn't mean that they're not engaged. It doesn't mean that their kid isn't their primary priority. Life happens. So just remember to do it and keep it up and try to keep communication open as much as you can. And the other thing that is cool about communicating with families is that you can write social stories. You can do things with your kids and link them and make those connections to their home life. Okay, I'm almost out of time. Also, just remember that families are the experts in their child and honor that experience and expertise. So even though you have experience with visual impairment and you're going to be the expert in that, just know that they know their kid better than anybody else, and they are full of wisdom about that child, and they can help you to gain that child's trust and to teach them the most effective way possible. Okay, thanks. Have a great week.